The wind howled like a mourner when I returned to our research station. I never imagined Margaret would be there, waiting to destroy everything. I was Fiona Carrington, glaciologist and widow at 34 years old. My husband Ian died 3 months ago in what officials called a tragic accident. The Coast Guard found his research vessel capsized near the Shetland Islands during a routine data collection. His body washed ashore 2 days later. The coroner said hypothermia took him quickly and mercifully. I knew better, though. Ian was too experienced, too careful with his equipment and protocols. Something felt wrong from the moment I received the call. Ian and I had spent 7 years building our climate research station on this remote Scottish island. We monitored ice cores and ocean temperatures, tracking the rapid changes threatening this fragile ecosystem. Our marriage was built on shared passion for the truth buried in ancient ice. I arrived at our station on a bitter January morning. The sky hung low and grey like a funeral shroud. My boots crunched through fresh snow as I approached the small cluster of buildings perched on the granite cliff. I expected emptiness and grief to greet me. Instead, I found a sleek black Range Rover parked near our modest entrance. My stomach twisted into a painful knot. Only one person would arrive in such ostentatious luxury. Margaret Huxley, my mother, in-law and chairwoman of Huxley Energy Ventures. She never approved of Ian marrying a common researcher without connections or fortune. She certainly never visited our remote outpost while Ian was alive. The main door swung open before I could insert my key. Margaret stood in the threshold wearing an immaculate wool coat and leather gloves. Her silver hair was pulled tight in a bun that stretched her skin unnaturally. Her eyes narrowed when she saw me standing there with my battered suitcase. I steeled myself against the coming storm. Margaret looked me up and down with practiced disdain. She informed me that as next of kin, she now controlled all of Ian's assets and property. This included our research station and all equipment inside. Her tone was colder than the wind slicing through my inadequate jacket. I argued that our work belonged to Aberdeen University and the Climate Research Initiative. Margaret smiled without warmth or humor. She unfolded a document from her designer handbag and thrust it toward me. The research station had apparently been purchased from the university 6 months ago by a subsidiary of Huxley Energy. My name appeared nowhere on the paperwork. Margaret stated I had 20 minutes to collect personal belongings and leave the premises. Security personnel would arrive shortly to change access codes and install new locks. Her voice remained perfectly even as she dismantled my entire world. My hands trembled with both rage and disbelief. I pleaded for access to the climate data. Ian and I had collected over 7 years of dedicated work. The corners of her mouth twitched upward slightly. Margaret claimed all research materials now belonged to Huxley Energy as intellectual property. She suggested I pursue other research opportunities far from Scotland and the Huxley family. Her implication was clear as ice. My presence was unwelcome, and my career effectively finished. Powerful people could ensure I never received another research grant or university position. Margaret checked her expensive watch with theatrical impatience. 15 minutes remained before I would be physically removed from my own home and laboratory. I stumbled past her into the familiar common room, feeling like a stranger. Framed photos of Ian and me had already disappeared from the walls. Our collection of geological samples was packed in corporate shipping containers. 7 years of memories and research being systematically erased. The sight almost brought me to my knees. Almost. Something hardened inside me instead. A cold. Determination formed like permafrost beneath grief. I moved quickly through rooms that no longer felt like mine. I grabbed clothes and essential documents from our small bedroom. The laboratory door stood partially open, showing glimpses of destruction. My heart nearly stopped at the sight. Our meticulously preserved ice core samples lay shattered on stainless steel tables. Temperature-controlled storage units stood empty with doors ajar. Computer hard drives had been removed from their stations. A metal drum in the center of the room contained smoldering papers and notebooks. Ian's field notes were literally going up in smoke before my eyes. Margaret glided into the laboratory behind me. She commented that outdated research materials needed proper disposal for environmental reasons. Her lips curved into what might generously be called a smile. The hypocrisy burned worse than the papers turning to ash in the drum. 3 burly men in security uniforms appeared suddenly behind me. Time had apparently run out. I clutched my pathetic bundle of belongings as they moved to escort me from the premises. Margaret turned away dismissively as if I no longer existed. The security guards marched me toward the exit with professional efficiency. One firmly gripped my upper arm when I tried to look back at the laboratory. Snow began falling in earnest as they pushed me outside onto the narrow path. The door locked with an authoritative click behind me. I stood alone as sleet pelted my inadequate clothing. The black Range Rover remained smugly parked by the entrance. My own vehicle was nowhere to be seen. Margaret had thought of everything. The nearest village lay 5 miles away across treacherous winter terrain. I pulled my thin jacket tighter against the howling wind. The temperature dropped steadily as daylight faded into early winter darkness. Hypothermia would claim me within. Hours if I attempted the journey to the village on foot. Ian had suffered the same fate according to official reports. Perhaps this was no coincidence after all. The thought sent ice through my veins colder than the gathering storm. I needed shelter immediately, or I would not survive the night. I stumbled along the perimeter of our research compound, searching for any overlooked entrance. The security lights cast sharp shadows across the fresh snow. I moved carefully to avoid being spotted through windows. My fingers grew numb inside thin gloves as I tested each door and window. All were securely locked against me. Desperation mounted with each passing minute in the freezing gale. The maintenance shed might offer temporary shelter from the elements. I fought my way through deepening snow toward the small outbuilding 50 yards from the main complex. The padlock hung open on the shed door, a small mercy or simple oversight. I slipped inside quickly and pulled the door closed against the wind. The shed offered minimal protection, but would keep me alive until morning. Dusty equipment and spare parts filled the cramped space. I found an old emergency blanket among the supplies and wrapped it around my shivering body. My mind raced, despite physical exhaustion. Margaret had orchestrated this entire scenario with clinical precision. She eliminated Ian, seized our research, and now attempted to remove the final obstacle. Me. The question echoing in my frozen thoughts was simple and terrifying. Why go to such lengths to acquire a modest climate research station? Something in that station held value beyond scientific data. Margaret Huxley did nothing without calculated purpose and significant profit. I needed to get back inside before whatever evidence remained disappeared forever. The security team would assume I fled toward the village for help. They would not expect me to return to the station itself. The maintenance tunnels running beneath the main building might provide access if I could reach them undetected. I forced myself to rest briefly while formulating a plan. The storm would provide cover for my approach under darkness. Hours passed as I waited for the optimal moment. The security lights flickered occasionally in the intensifying blizzard. I gathered tools that might prove useful from the shed shelves. The emergency blanket became a makeshift pack for carrying them. Around midnight, the exterior lights failed completely as power lines succumbed to ice and wind. My opportunity had arrived with perfect timing. I slipped from the shed into swirling snow and near total darkness. The storm masked my footprints almost immediately. I moved by memory toward the hidden maintenance hatch at the rear of the compound. The metal access panel was partially buried under snow and frozen shut. I used a screwdriver from my improvised toolkit to chip away ice from the edges. My fingers burned painfully as circulation returned while working the panel loose. After 10 minutes of careful effort, the hatch groaned open, revealing a narrow ladder descending into darkness. I lowered myself quickly and pulled the panel closed above me. The service tunnel stretched ahead in perfect blackness. I felt my way forward using the wall as guide. The darkness was almost comforting after hours in the howling storm. The tunnel led directly to the basement level of our research facility. I emerged into the boiler room disoriented but determined. The security team would focus on exterior doors and windows. They might not monitor internal passages on the first night. I moved silently through familiar hallways, listening for voices or movement. The building seemed eerily quiet, except for heating systems and the distant howl of wind. I made my way toward the laboratory, where our research materials were being destroyed. The door stood partially open, allowing a thin line of light to escape into the darkened hallway. I peered cautiously through the narrow opening. The laboratory appeared empty of people, but devastation was evident everywhere. Shattered equipment and discarded research notes littered the floor. Someone had systematically destroyed 7 years of careful scientific documentation. The metal drum still smoldered in the center of the room. I slipped inside and closed the door quietly behind me. What remained to find in this disaster? I moved methodically through the wreckage, searching for anything overlooked in the destruction. Something had driven Margaret to these extreme measures. The answer must still exist somewhere. A small cabinet beneath the primary workstation remained locked and untouched. Ian always kept his most sensitive findings in this reinforced storage unit. Only we knew the combination based on our wedding anniversary and geographic coordinates of our first research site. I turned the dial with trembling fingers, praying the contents remained intact. The lock released with a soft click that sounded impossibly loud in the silent room. I eased the cabinet open and found a single metal lockbox inside. The box contained one sealed sample vial and a small waterproof flash drive. The vial bore a handwritten label reading Project Thule. My hands shook as I examined the cloudy liquid inside. A sound from the hallway froze me in position. Voices approached from the direction of the main entrance. Security making rounds, or Margaret returning to ensure complete destruction. I had no time to investigate further. I pocketed the vial and flash drive, then quickly restored the cabinet to its previous appearance. The voices grew louder, indicating multiple people moving toward the laboratory. I needed an exit route immediately. The small storage closet might provide temporary concealment. I slipped inside, pulling the door nearly closed, just as the laboratory door swung fully open. Margaret entered accompanied by a man I had never seen before. His expensive suit and authoritative posture suggested corporate executive rather than security personnel. Margaret gestured around the destroyed laboratory with evident satisfaction. She assured the man that all physical evidence had been completely eliminated. Digital records were securely transferred to company servers and original devices wiped clean. The man nodded approval while surveying the devastation. He commented that Project Thule remained on schedule despite minor setbacks. The North Sea test site was prepared for full implementation by April 1st. Margaret smiled at the news and added that removal of concerned parties had proceeded efficiently. My blood turned to ice water at their casual discussion of what could only be murder. The man asked specifically about recovered research materials. Margaret confidently stated all samples and data had been secured or destroyed according to protocol. No evidence remained to contradict official narratives about experimental climate intervention. The man seemed pleased with her thoroughness. He mentioned shareholders would be relieved to hear the situation was contained. Projected profits from exclusive implementation exceeded £400 million in the first year alone. The energy market would transform overnight once Project Thule proved successful at scale. Their conversation confirmed my worst suspicions. while raising horrifying new questions. What climate intervention was Huxley energy planning that required eliminating witnesses? What was Project Thule, and how did it connect to the North Sea test site? Most importantly, how had Ian discovered their scheme and what had it cost him? I remained perfectly still as Margaret and her colleague concluded their business. They discussed security arrangements for the facility during the transition period. The building would remain under guard until equipment transfer completed in 3 days. Margaret mentioned poor weather conditions might delay transport vehicles temporarily. After they departed, I waited 15 agonizing minutes before emerging from my hiding place. I needed to examine the contents of the flash drive immediately. My personal laptop remained in the small office adjacent to our living quarters. I moved silently through darkened hallways toward the residential wing. The building felt like a mausoleum of my former life. Personal items had been packed or discarded throughout the common areas. Photos and books that made this remote station, our home, were now erased completely. My office appeared relatively untouched compared to the laboratory. Perhaps Margaret considered personal items irrelevant to her purposes. My laptop sat on the desk precisely where I had left it months ago, when rushing to the mainland after news of the accident. I powered it on and inserted the flash drive with trembling fingers. The drive contained dozens of encrypted files with meaningless alphanumeric names. A single text document titled, "For Fiona," sat among the indecipherable files. My heart raced as I opened the document and found a message from beyond the grave. Ian had prepared for the worst-case scenario. The message was brief and urgent. Trust no official channels. Encryption key is where we first saw Northern Lights. Find Ollie at Sunberg Lighthouse. Data proves Thule project will devastate marine ecosystem. Love beyond measure. Tears blurred my vision as I read his final words over and over. Ian knew the dangers of his discovery. He created this fail-safe in case something happened to him. The encryption key referenced our first night together on the island 7 years ago. We had watched the aurora borealis from Ravencliff while sharing our first bottle of wine. The date and coordinates would unlock the encrypted files. I entered the information with shaking hands, and the files began decrypting one by one. Pages of technical specifications and environmental impact data filled my screen. Project Thule was far worse than I imagined. The documents detailed an experimental geoengineering system designed to artificially warm North Sea waters. Huxley Energy had developed technology to raise ocean temperatures by 3 degrees in targeted areas. The system would create new drilling opportunities in previously inaccessible locations. It would also dramatically alter marine environments and accelerate coastal erosion. Most disturbing were the projected weather pattern changes. The system would create unprecedented storm systems affecting coastal communities throughout Scotland and Norway. The company knew these consequences and proceeded anyway. Profit superseded environmental catastrophe and potential loss of human life. Ian had discovered their test site while collecting ocean temperature data. His routine samples revealed anomalous warming patterns inconsistent with natural phenomena. He tracked the source to an experimental facility disguised as a decommissioned oil platform. The platform housed prototype equipment already affecting surrounding waters. Marine life had begun dying in expanding circles around the site. Ian documented everything with meticulous scientific precision. He had compiled irrefutable evidence of corporate environmental crimes on an unprecedented scale. His data would have triggered international investigations and criminal charges. No wonder Margaret eliminated him. I needed to get this information to proper authorities immediately. The encrypted flash drive contained evidence that could stop Project Thule and bring Margaret to justice. First, I needed to escape the research station undetected. Security would discover my presence soon if they conducted thorough sweeps of the building. I gathered essential supplies and copied the decrypted files to a secure cloud storage account. The original flash drive went back into my pocket alongside the mysterious sample vial. I erased all traces of my activities from the laptop and prepared to depart through the maintenance tunnels. A sudden noise from the hallway alerted me to danger. Heavy footsteps approached my office door with purpose rather than routine patrol. Someone knew I had returned to the station. I grabbed my small pack and slipped behind the office door just as it swung open. A powerful flashlight beam swept across the room, illuminating my recently used laptop. The security guard spoke quietly. Into his radio reporting suspected intruder activity in the residential wing. He requested immediate backup and moved further into the office. His attention focused on the laptop gave me precious seconds to slip through the doorway into the hall. I ran silently toward the basement access point leading to the maintenance tunnels. Voices echoed through the building as security personnel converged on the residential wing. My heart pounded painfully against my ribs as I descended the ladder into darkness. The tunnel stretched before me, offering escape if I could reach the exterior hatch before alarms triggered lockdown protocols. I moved as quickly as possible in the near-total darkness. My fingers traced the rough wall, guiding me forward. The exit hatch appeared ahead, just as lights flickered on in the tunnel behind me. They had discovered my escape route. I pushed against the metal hatch with desperate strength. Frozen hinges resisted initially, then surrendered with a groan that seemed impossibly loud. The storm still raged outside, providing cover for my escape into the darkness. I pulled the hatch closed behind me and scattered snow over the metal surface. Heavy snowfall would conceal my tracks within minutes. I oriented myself toward the coastal path leading to Sunburg Lighthouse. Ollie McLeod maintained the historic lighthouse and apparently shared some connection to Ian and his discoveries. The journey would be treacherous in blizzard conditions, but remaining near the research station meant certain capture. The coastal path twisted along treacherous cliffs overlooking the raging North Sea. Normally, a challenging hike even in daylight and fair weather. The storm transformed it into a nightmarish gauntlet of ice-slicked rocks and near-zero visibility. I followed the path from memory and desperation. Each step required complete concentration to avoid fatal missteps in the darkness. The wind howled around me, drowning out any sounds of possible pursuit. The temperature continued dropping throughout the night. My extremities grew numb despite constant movement. Hypothermia remained a constant threat, just as it had claimed Ian. Or so the official story claimed. Hours passed in a blur of exhaustion and determination. The storm began to ease as false dawn illuminated the eastern horizon. I had covered approximately half the distance to Sunburg Lighthouse. The wind carried a faint mechanical sound from somewhere behind me. Helicopter rotors beating against the pre-dawn sky. Margaret had escalated the search beyond security personnel. The helicopter would easily spot my tracks in daylight regardless of snowfall. I needed shelter and concealment immediately. The eroded coastline featured numerous small caves carved by centuries of punishing ocean waves. One such cave opened in the cliff face just ahead, to my tremendous relief. I scrambled inside the narrow opening as helicopter searchlights swept the coastline behind me. The natural shelter extended deeper into the cliff than expected. The cave widened into a modest chamber beyond the entrance. Previous visitors had left evidence of temporary occupation. A small fire pit contained partially burned driftwood. Empty food containers and a frayed blanket suggested recent human presence. The helicopter noise grew louder as it systematically searched the coastal path. I pressed myself against the rear wall of the cave, praying the entrance remained unnoticed from above. The searchlight briefly illuminated the opening, then continued its sweep without pausing. The immediate danger passed, but my situation remained desperate. Daylight would make travel along the exposed path impossible without detection. The helicopter would certainly return with reinforcements once weather permitted thorough search operations. I needed to contact Ollie McLeod and secure the evidence before Margaret realized exactly what I had taken. The sample vial and encrypted Data drive represented the only remaining proof of Huxley energy crimes. I examined the mysterious vial in the dim light filtering through the cave entrance. The cloudy liquid contained suspended particles visible when agitated. Project Thule clearly involved more than temperature manipulation equipment. I dozed fitfully as morning fully arrived. The storm had moved inland, leaving relative calm in its wake. Perfect conditions for aerial search operations. I needed to move under cover of darkness when the helicopter would be grounded. The cave provided adequate shelter until nightfall, if I could endure the cold and hunger. I arranged the abandoned blanket and driftwood to create minimal comfort in my temporary refuge. Hours crawled past with excruciating slowness. I studied the decrypted files on my phone, conserving battery power carefully. The technical specifications revealed horrifying details about Project Thule methodology. The system utilized a proprietary chemical compound to alter thermal properties of seawater. The chemicals formed a dispersion layer that trapped and amplified solar radiation within a targeted depth range. The process effectively created an artificial greenhouse effect within marine environments. Controlled release allowed precise targeting of specific undersea regions. Huxley Energy planned to use this technology to melt previously inaccessible subsea permafrost regions containing vast oil and natural gas deposits. The potential profits approached billions of pounds within 5 years. The environmental consequences were classified as acceptable collateral impact in internal documents. Most disturbing was the timeline for full implementation. The North Sea test site had already released preliminary chemical agents. The main deployment would begin within 2 weeks, coinciding with spring thaw conditions. Once released, the compounds would persist in marine environments for an estimated 17 years before natural degradation. The damage to ecosystems would be irreversible within months. Coastal communities would face unprecedented flooding and erosion within the first year. The documents outlined public relations strategies for attributing these effects to natural climate change phenomena. Huxley Energy had prepared comprehensive disinformation campaigns to accompany Project Thule deployment. Evening shadows finally lengthened across the cave entrance. I prepared to continue my journey under cover of darkness. The success of my mission now felt imperative beyond personal justice for Ian. Thousands of lives and irreplaceable ecosystems depended on exposing Project Thule before deployment reached critical stages. I gathered my few possessions and waited for full darkness before emerging cautiously from the cave. The night air felt comparatively mild after the previous storm. Stars appeared between scattered clouds, offering sufficient light for navigation along the coastal path. I oriented myself towards Sumburg Lighthouse, visible as a distant pinpoint of light marking the southern extremity of Shetland Island. I traveled carefully but with greater speed on the improved terrain. The lighthouse grew slowly larger against the night sky. After 2 hours of steady hiking, the historic stone tower stood before me in moonlit solemnity. A small cottage nestled against its base, showing warm light through curtained windows. I approached cautiously, unsure of my welcome or Ollie MacLeod's allegiances. Ian had trusted the lighthouse keeper with knowledge that proved fatal. I needed similar trust, while remaining vigilant against further betrayal. I knocked softly on the wooden door and waited with pounding heart. Footsteps approached from inside, followed by a gruff voice demanding identification. I stated my name clearly, adding that Ian had directed me to this location. Several locks disengaged in succession before the door opened, revealing a weathered man in his 60s with a silver beard and suspicious eyes. Ollie MacLeod studied me intently before glancing past me into the darkness. He pulled me roughly inside and secured the multiple locks with practiced efficiency. His living quarters were Spartan, but meticulously organized. Navigation charts and weather instruments covered most available surfaces. He gestured wordlessly toward a chair by the small fireplace. I sank gratefully into the seat while he poured amber liquid into 2 glasses. Ollie confirmed my identity with rapid questions about Ian and our research. His manner remained brusque but gradually warmed as my answers satisfied his caution. He revealed that Ian had contacted him 3 months ago with concerns about anomalous readings near the oil platform. Ollie had access to historical marine navigation and weather data through the lighthouse archives. He helped Ian correlate temperature changes with Huxley energy activities in the region. They documented a clear pattern of environmental manipulation centered on the decommissioned platform. Ollie warned Ian about the dangers of investigating further without protection. His warning proved tragically accurate. Our conversation was interrupted by 3 sharp knocks at the door. Ollie froze momentarily, then moved with surprising agility for his age. He motioned me toward a narrow staircase leading upward into the lighthouse proper. I hurried up the worn stone steps as Ollie approached the door with deliberate slowness. I paused on the landing, listening intently as he greeted the late-night visitor. A female voice with distinct Indian accent responded with polite formality. The woman identified herself as Dr. Priya Kapoor from Aberdeen University Marine Sciences Division. She requested immediate consultation on urgent environmental anomalies observed in coastal waters. Ollie reluctantly admitted the visitor while maintaining position, blocking the staircase. I remained hidden in shadows as they entered the main room. Dr. Kapoor appeared to be in her early 40s, wearing practical field clothing under an institutional Gore-Tex jacket. She carried sophisticated water testing equipment and digital tablets. Her demeanor projected professional urgency rather than threatening intent. She reported massive marine die-offs occurring along the eastern coastline within the past 48 hours. Fish and marine mammals were washing ashore with inexplicable cellular degradation. Aberdeen University monitoring stations recorded temperature increases of 2 degrees Celsius across widespread areas. Dr. Kapoor had traced the epicenter of the anomaly to coordinates matching the suspected test platform. University administrators refused to authorize official investigation, citing contractual obligations to Huxley Energy. She mentioned similar administrative interference when a researcher named Carrington reported concerning data months earlier. The mention of Ian by name caught my attention completely. Priya Kapoor had recognized the same pattern Ian discovered before his death. She came to Ollie seeking historical data to corroborate her findings before approaching environmental enforcement agencies. Her frustration and professional concern seemed genuine as she spread charts across the worn table. I descended the stairs slowly, making my presence known. Dr. Kapoor reacted with startled surprise, while Ollie watched my decision with neutral expression. I introduced myself as Ian Carrington's research partner and widow. Understanding dawned in her eyes immediately. She expressed condolences while studying me with newfound interest. I revealed possession of comprehensive data documenting Project Thule activities and environmental impacts. The 3 of us formed an uneasy alliance born of shared concern and complementary knowledge. Priya brought current scientific readings and academic credibility. Ollie contributed historical data and local geographical knowledge. I provided the critical evidence directly linking Huxley Energy to deliberate environmental manipulation. We worked through the night compiling irrefutable documentation of Project Thule activities and consequences. The vial contents underwent preliminary analysis using Priya's portable equipment. The liquid contained engineered microparticles designed to alter thermal properties of surrounding water. The particles used proprietary carbon lattice structures to capture and intensify solar radiation within marine environments. Released in sufficient concentration, they would effectively microwave targeted ocean regions. The technology constituted weaponized climate manipulation disguised as industrial development. International treaties explicitly prohibited such applications of geoengineering technology. Huxley Energy had crossed from environmental negligence into prosecutable crimes against humanity. Dawn approached as we finalized our comprehensive report documenting Project Thule in exhaustive detail.
We needed to transmit this information to multiple oversight agencies simultaneously before Margaret could intervene. The lighthouse communication systems offered secure channels unavailable at standard commercial facilities. Ollie began establishing
connections with environmental protection authorities, maritime safety organizations, and international regulatory commissions. Priya prepared concise scientific briefings highlighting immediate dangers and required containment procedures. I assembled the chronological evidence of corporate conspiracy, including financial projections, and witnessed statements regarding deliberate harm. The distant sound of helicopter rotors interrupted our focused activities. Ollie checked radar equipment, confirming 3 aircraft approaching from the northeast. 2 matched Coast Guard configurations, while the third appeared to be private security, contractor model. Margaret had clearly mobilized significant resources to contain the situation. We had minutes at most before the lighthouse would be surrounded. Ollie immediately initiated emergency transmission protocols, sending our compiled evidence to 17 separate international agencies. The digital packages contained geographical coordinates, chemical analysis, corporate documents, and witness testimonies. A preliminary transmission confirmation appeared on his communication console. A massive wave suddenly struck the lighthouse with extraordinary force. The stone structure shuddered from foundation to lantern room. Seawater cascaded down windows designed to withstand the most punishing North Atlantic storms. Ollie checked meteorological instrumentation with growing alarm. No storm systems appeared on radar, despite conditions suggesting Category 3 cyclonic activity directly offshore. The unnatural wave resulted from sudden thermal expansion in previously stable ocean terrain. Project Thule had entered active deployment phase ahead of documented schedules. The platform was releasing chemical agents in desperate quantities. Priya confirmed catastrophic temperature increases appearing across monitoring networks. The Bai helicopters altered course, responding to the unpredicted marine disturbance. 2 immediately returned toward mainland, while the third continued toward our position with apparent determination. Our transmissions showed complete delivery to multiple receiving stations. The evidence was secure regardless of our individual fates. Relief mingled with renewed determination as another massive wave struck the lighthouse foundation. The timing was not coincidental. Margaret had initiated premature deployment to literally drown the evidence. The uncontrolled release threatened far more than our small group. Coastal communities throughout the region faced immediate danger from the artificial tsunami conditions. Ollie accessed emergency broadcast channels reserved for imminent threat conditions. He transmitted precise warning messages to all vessels and coastal settlements within 50 miles. The official nature of lighthouse communications lent credibility to warnings that might otherwise face skepticism. Evacuation procedures initiated across vulnerable communities as local authorities recognized genuine danger in the rapidly deteriorating conditions. The helicopter hovered briefly near the lighthouse before weather conditions forced retreat toward higher ground. Margaret could no longer reach us directly, but her desperate actions threatened thousands of innocent lives. The lighthouse communication systems suddenly detected an automated distress signal activating beneath the ocean floor. The signal originated from fail-safe systems built into the experimental platform itself. Emergency protocols had triggered, indicating catastrophic containment failure at the deployment site. The uncontrolled chemical release exceeded all test parameters and safety thresholds. Platform monitoring systems projected complete structural collapse within 2 hours due to surrounding water temperature destabilization. The very technology designed to melt Arctic subsea permafrost was now melting the platform structure itself in cruel irony. Margaret had inadvertently triggered a cascading environmental disaster that would inevitably lead directly back to Huxley. Energy. The evidence trail existed in multiple international jurisdictions beyond her influence. Corporate records confirmed her direct involvement from initial planning through implementation and attempted cover-up. The incoming tide of legal consequences would prove inescapable once authorities correlated platform failure with transmitted evidence. Financial markets would respond with devastating speed once trading opened. Her desperate attempt to silence witnesses had instead amplified their evidence to global scale. Emergency services mobilized with impressive efficiency following Ollie's warnings. Coastal evacuation proceeded ahead of the artificially generated wave systems. Priya coordinated with university colleagues to document environmental impacts in real time. International news organizations picked up the developing story within hours. The unprecedented coastal surges defied conventional explanations, drawing worldwide scientific attention. Our transmitted evidence packages reached multiple investigative journalists through agency connections. The story exploded across global media platforms by midday. Huxley Energy stock plummeted 97% before trading suspended. Margaret faced simultaneous investigations from environmental agencies, financial regulators, and criminal prosecutors. We monitored developments from the lighthouse as conditions gradually stabilized offshore. The platform failsafe systems managed to neutralize chemical dispersal through emergency containment protocols. The damage already inflicted would require years of dedicated remediation efforts. Marine ecosystems suffered catastrophic disruption across hundreds of square miles. Coastal erosion accelerated decades of natural processes within hours. The financial cost to affected communities exceeded £3 billion, according to preliminary assessments. Each impact traced directly to Project Thule and its reckless implementation under Margaret Huxley's explicit direction. 3 days. After our evidence transmission, international arrest warrants issued for Margaret and 5 senior Huxley Energy executives. Corporate assets faced immediate freeze pending criminal proceedings and civil liability judgments. Margaret attempted to flee jurisdiction aboard her private aircraft. Aviation authorities tracked the flight path and coordinated interception with Norwegian law enforcement. She was detained while refueling at Bergen Airport. Financial forensics revealed evidence of 4 similar platform installations in early development stages. All faced immediate shutdown and containment under emergency international provisions. The conspiracy extended through multiple corporate entities and regulatory bodies, each connection now exposed to public scrutiny and legal consequence. The aftermath unfolded with remarkable speed, driven by unprecedented public outrage. Criminal proceedings against Margaret began in international court 6 weeks after platform failure. Corporate conspiracy charges carried potential 30-year sentences under environmental terrorism provisions. Civil liability judgments awarded majority Huxley Energy assets to affected communities and ecosystem restoration trusts. The research station returned to university administration with expanded funding for climate impact assessment. Ian received posthumous recognition for environmental protection contributions. His meticulous documentation proved instrumental in preventing multiple deployment sites from activation. I stood on the cliff path overlooking our research station, exactly 1 year after that fateful winter night. The facility operated at full capacity, monitoring recovery efforts across affected marine environments. Spring sunshine warmed the rocky landscape, so different from the howling blizzard of my desperate escape. Construction crews expanded laboratory facilities to accommodate increased research personnel. Aberdeen University established permanent environmental monitoring systems throughout the coastal region. International funding supported comprehensive ecosystem recovery initiatives directed by leading marine science experts. Dr. Priya Kapoor led the primary research team investigating long-term remediation strategies. I resumed my position as senior research coordinator, focusing on climate data collection and analysis. My professional reputation enhanced rather than destroyed by involvement in exposing Project Thule. The legal proceedings against Margaret continued through appeals and jurisdictional challenges. Her formidable resources now directed toward avoiding consequences rather than expanding corporate empire. The evidence remained irrefutable despite expensive legal maneuvering. Her eventual criminal conviction seemed inevitable based on preliminary court rulings. Financial penalties had already reduced the once mighty Huxley fortune to moderate wealth under strict regulatory oversight. Ollie MacLeod continued maintaining Sunburg Lighthouse with characteristic gruff efficiency. He reluctantly accepted a governmental commendation for public service during the crisis. His warning messages had prevented loss of life despite unprecedented coastal surges. He visited the research station, periodically providing historical context for ongoing climate studies. His friendship offered unexpected comfort as I rebuilt both professional and personal life from the wreckage Margaret created. Ian would have appreciated the understated alliance between lighthouse keeper and research scientists. His legacy lived on in our continued work protecting fragile northern ecosystems. The small memorial garden behind the research station bloomed with native coastal plants selected for resilience against harsh conditions. A simple stone marker bore Ian's name and favorite quote about truth hiding in ancient ice. I visited at sunrise each morning before beginning daily research activities. The garden represented the personal aspect of loss among the larger environmental recovery efforts. The climate data Ian died protecting now informed protection measures for coastal communities worldwide. His final message had guided me through darkness toward both justice and continued purpose. The evidence he preserved exposed corporate environmental crimes at tremendous personal cost. Looking back now, I recognize how grief transformed into determination rather than reckless vengeance. The path forward involved exposing truth through established scientific and legal channels. Margaret ultimately destroyed herself through unrestrained greed and contempt for natural systems. The consequences she now faced emerged directly from her own actions and decisions. The most appropriate justice came through systematic documentation and exposure of corporate crimes. Ian would have approved of this methodical approach to truth-telling. His careful research protocols extended into my response to his unlawful death. The evidence spoke with power no personal vendetta could match. Have you ever discovered that revealing the unvarnished truth delivered more perfect justice than any revenge you might have planned?